just because you work hard at your job doesn't mean people should listen when you talk.
That's the main concern that I have, I think, around what we're teaching young people to do with fame, is what does it teach people? It teaches people not to work very hard for a long period of time at one thing and develop mastery. It teaches them that you're supposed to have luck, right? That you just plucked out of obscurity and then put up on a pedestal through some reality TV show or through some random video of you drinking cranberry juice on a skateboard on TikTok or something. Like, that's how you do it. And I'm not convinced that that creates the sort of generation atmosphere, work ethic that's actually going to develop anything other than more TikTok videos and more reality TV.
But don't you think the boomer version of work ethic, in my opinion, was noble but naive? And when I say naive, I mean that they were working for corporations that were doing very little for them, right? And now we've seen quite a bit more of that. There's finally, there's this a lot of people refer to it as a reimagining of the workplace. Working from home, I don't think is the big part of that. I think it's the relationship between workers and management. And I don't think that organized labor has done very much positive shit for like 100 years now, right? I mean, there's been some movement. I guess organized labor was pretty influential in the civil rights era. But since then, it's been kind of like a lot of corruption and a lot of people like Randy Weingarten at American Federation of Teachers, who, like, if you work for a teachers union or you're a teacher, your job, your first priority should be to do the best for children possible, I think, right? Like, if you're involved in any way in the process of developing children into adults, and it's just not been the case for these people. They've routinely, like, sabotaged movements that were actively helping kids. And over the last 2 years, they've tried really hard to keep schools closed down. And we have incontrovertible data that shows that is extremely harmful to children. So I wonder if we're not seeing some kind of overreaction now. I mean, you should expect that, right? If people are abused long enough, they're going to fucking lash out. And I wonder, like, everybody complains about not being able to find good workers anymore. I hate to just write that off as lazy. The next generation is lazy. You know what I mean? I think that is a weak answer to that question.
It's too simplistic.
Yeah.
People are products of whatever it is that they've been brought through. I think that you're right with noble and naive from our parents' generation. And you see that with their lack of understanding around leverage. Also, you didn't have as many accesses to leverage.
Well, people couldn't move across country and take a new job all of a sudden. Well, they could technically, but it was a much more Herculean task. God damn it. It was a huge effort to move from one place to another. I can't fucking talk today.
Yeah, so I think what you've done, you've enabled this sort of global workplace as well, right? You can be some dude in the northeast of the UK working freelance for pretty much any company on the planet now, especially after the pandemic. So that ability to leverage your work, to be able to write a program once and sell it to an unlimited, basically 7 billion people, that ability to have leverage is something that we need to teach people. And that completely flips the power from it being gatekept through organizations. So think about it this way. Up until sort of the 1400s, I think, in England, there was no non-Latin translation of the Bible available.
Yeah, until the 1511 King James Version, I believe.
I think it was Thomas Blackwell, I want to say, is the guy that did it, and he was killed for it, right? And what he was doing was he was making access to Scripture, access to God as well. He was emancipating that, right? He was creating that in a way that allowed the common people to get access to it.
I mean, it was intellectual feudalism, basically, right? I mean, that's what it is. And we're seeing it again today, but continue.
You had a gate-kept ability for the normal people to access God. You had to go to church, you had to believe, the priest was your conduit, right? From the normal person to God, priest the conduit. The same thing happened with work.
Yeah.
In between capital that workers wanted and the workers, were companies. They mediated it.
Yeah.
They were the ones that were able to take it. How you were some brass worker or some shit, right? Like, what are you going to do? Go and ask people that need brass if
Go
they
door
need
to door, yeah.
Yeah, no, you can't do that,
Yeah.
right? So you go to a company, and the company is now your conduit. Now we've had our King James Bible given to us.
Yeah, we have, but we haven't figured out what to do with it yet, I don't think, right?
Some people have.
I don't know if the global market has figured it out either. So let's go backwards a little bit to like even the early 20th century in America, all these textile mills and shit. They would pay you part of your salary in advance in a currency that would only work at their company store. Right? So you live, let's say, Austin, downtown Austin, there's a mill that makes fucking cotton, right? Or that makes stuff out of cotton. Everybody in town works there in some facility or some capacity. In the early 20th century, particularly in the South, my grandparents worked at a place like this. Everybody that works there lives in the same neighborhood, a neighborhood that was built by the company, right? And you are buying the home from the company or leasing it from the company in some instances. And you have a general store, but it's actually a company store. It's a general store owned by the company because they know people aren't going to drive 45 minutes away to buy common goods, right? They're just going to buy right there. So that company controls almost every facet of your life.
So basically giving you tokens to then pay the company back to
Right.
live, to exist.
But that's feudalism. That's what it is. Like you can
like
work.
a baron that you need to live underneath.
You can work, but I'm getting a piece of that, right? And that seems extremely problematic. And it didn't take very long for it to happen in America where we said we weren't going to do that, right? We said we weren't going to do feudalism. We said we weren't going to do an aristocracy, but we almost immediately developed both of those things.
Why do you think that repurposes itself, reinvents itself?
Over and over. And since, like, even when the Vikings were first starting to fuck up mainland Europe a little bit.
They landed about 10 miles away from where I live in the UK.
Yeah.
You can
What
go
was
see
that, like the 10th century?
Yes.
Late 10th century, yeah. So, I mean, from what we still know about that, feudalism already existed then in England. I mean, the Roman Empire was feudalistic as well.
Okay, so is it just that when you have a concentration of power, people then begin to try and gatekeep access to that power by limiting things and by, how would you say, controlling people, by collaborating with other people that have got high amounts of power to continue to keep this position, this system in place?
I would think so, yeah. But I mean, it's also like taking it a step backward. Power concentrates. I think that's...
Yeah, power laws are everything.
That's the rule, right?
I mean, you guys understand this, right? Like your guys' network will account for the same as the bottom 50% of podcasts in America, right?
Yep.
Because they're all doing tiny amounts of plays. So
Right.
everything concentrates. This is Jordan Peterson's work. I had him on my show not long ago.
The hierarchy stuff, yeah.
Precisely, yeah. It concentrates at the top. And some of that's a good thing, you know? Like,
well, when it's a benevolent, when it's Augustus Caesar, it's a good thing. When it's fucking one of the assholes that followed after him, not so much. Right?
Nero.
Yeah, Nero was kind of a dick. I'm told, or a lunatic. One or the
Both.
other. Like, was he into cannibalism and shit?
I think he did some pretty wild stuff.
Like
I think
drinking
pretty sure
blood,
he
vampirism?
killed one of his like young boy lovers for some reason. Did some other kind of weird shit.
There's a lot of media propaganda about Nero who
boy,
just
here we go.
loved Rome.
Hang on,
okay? He
are we
was a
saying that
Roman patriot.
With disinformation from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. A lot
Shit,
of
son. Nothing's safe anymore.
It was MSNBC. They just didn't like Nero. But yeah, those are. It seems to be like gravity, right? The guy Steve, whatever that astronaut, that discovered how accretion works. Remember?
No.
We didn't know how the moon came to be. We thought maybe it was a giant piece of rock that glanced off of us and just stayed in orbit or something like that. And then he put a bunch of salt in an empty bag while he was on the ISS and would shake it up and just look at it, and he would find that the salt would come back together somehow. So, I mean, that makes sense, but we didn't think about it at the time, right?
Is the effect of that purely because each grain of salt has a
Mass.
tiny amount of gravity, and then over time, okay.
Yeah, it has some amount of mass. Right. So I mean, maybe power's just like that, and there's nothing you can do about that. So maybe it's important to pay attention to the kind of people that we're putting in power and not say, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, for example, which is commonplace in America.
One of the problems that you have is that as soon as people get power, it's very, very difficult to take it back from them.
Nobody's ever voted their way out of a fucking tyranny. That's for sure.
Well, you can do two things the way that I see it. And this is an interesting discussion I wanted to have with you about kind of woke culture, especially seeing as we've both got Douglas coming on our show soon. There's two ways that I see that you can try and enact big social change, right? You can mandate it top down, bureaucracy, litigation, laws, advisories, guidelines, education, or you can try and make it emergent bottom up. And that's social enforcement, ridicule, satire, limitations placed on you by your family, expectations,
shame
praise.
is what you're...
Praise? No, praise as well.
Praise, shame and praise, yeah.
Yeah, correct. So you need to reinforce or disincentivize. And this example's so good. Think about the word PC, right? Politically correct, which was maybe sort of early noughts, 2000s came out. And very, very quickly, it was used. And then even more quickly, it was used as a satire of itself. Right? The PC brigade coming over. Then think about the word woke. Woke came up and was used unironically.
Yeah, for a while.
In the first instance.
Yeah.
Then very, very quickly, you get comedians and online commentators and smart people that weaponize that word against the people that are using it in a ridiculous way. And now you can't say woke unironically.